Letting go is often misunderstood as failure. The mind tells you that when someone leaves your life or when you choose to release them, something has been taken from you. But the deeper truth is this: what falls away is rarely your destiny. What falls away is your illusion, your projection, your unfinished inner work wearing another person as face. You believed you were holding on to love, but often you were holding on to familiarity, attachment, and the comfort of being seen through someone else's eyes. When she walks away, or when you finally open your hands, the silence that follows feels like loss. Yet that silence is not empty, it is a mirror. And for the first time, you are standing in front of yourself without distraction. We cling to people not only because we love them, but because they carry parts of our identity. The role of partner, rescuer, pursuer, protector, or the one who waits, these roles can become addictive. When the relationship ends, the role dies too. That is why it hurts so deeply. You are not just grieving a person, you are grieving the version of yourself you became around them. But this is where awakening begins. The breaking of attachment is the birth of awareness. You start to see your patterns, where you overgave, where you stayed silent, where you abandoned your own truth, just to remain chosen. The pain becomes a teacher, not gentle, not soft, but precise. You discover that love was never meant to cost your center. Real connection does not require self-erasure. If you had to shrink, chase, prove, or constantly fear abandonment, you were not in love. You were in negotiation with your wounds. Letting go is not pushing someone away in anger. It is releasing your grip on what no longer grows you. It is the courage to stop asking, how do I keep them? And start asking, who am I becoming? When you stop running after someone, you begin walking toward yourself. Your energy returns. Your intuition grows louder. Your boundaries become clearer. You no longer beg to be understood. You understand yourself first. Paradoxically, what you feared losing becomes your liberation. You gain emotional independence. You gain self-respect. You gain the ability to sit alone without feeling abandoned. And from that place, any future love becomes a choice, not a necessity. So no, you did not lose her when you let go. You lost your illusion. You lost your dependency. You lost your fear of standing alone. And in that sacred space where attachment once lived, you found yourself. Letting go feels like loss because the human heart is wired to attach meaning to presence. When someone becomes part of your daily emotional landscape, their absence feels like something has been taken. Almost like a physical subtraction from your inner world. But what hurts most is not always the person themselves. It is the structure of expectations, hopes, imagined futures, and emotional investments built around them. The mind does not just bond with reality, it bonds with possibility. When you let go, it is often those possibilities that collapse first, and their collapse can feel devastating. Attachment tends to weave stories faster than truth can verify them. You begin to believe not only in who someone is, but in who they could become, how they might change, how the relationship might evolve, how tomorrow will repair what today lacks. These mental and emotional projections become so vivid that they feel real. You respond to them, sacrifice for them, and endure discomfort for them. Over time, the imagined version and the actual person blur together. Letting go then feels like losing a great love, when in reality you may be releasing a powerful illusion stitched together by longing and fear. The illusion in love is subtle. It hides inside justification. You explain away repeated disappointments as stress, distance, timing, or misunderstanding. You call inconsistency complexity. You call emotional unavailability depth. You call neglect independence. The heart becomes a translator that turns emotional absence into poetic struggle. Letting go tears away that translation layer. Suddenly, what you defended looks different. What you tolerated looks heavier. The clarity can be shocking, and clarity itself can feel like grief. There is also an illusion of necessity, the belief that this one person is essential to your emotional survival. When attachment deepens, the nervous system starts treating connection like oxygen. The thought of separation triggers alarm, not because love is pure, but because dependency has quietly formed. Letting go breaks that false equation. You discover that breath continues, mornings still arrive, and your inner life, though shaken, remains alive. The illusion of emotional helplessness dissolves, and with it comes both discomfort and unexpected strength. Memory adds another layer to the illusion. The mind selectively preserves highlights and softens the edges of pain. You remember the warmth, the laughter, the moments of closeness, but you forget how often you felt unseen, uncertain, or emotionally stretched. Distance rearranges memory into a more beautiful picture than reality consistently offered. Letting go interrupts that editing process and restores the full frame. What feels like losing love is often losing distortion. What feels like losing them is often losing the story you wrapped around them. When illusion falls away, it leaves behind something quieter but more solid, self-awareness. You begin to recognize the difference between being emotionally moved and being emotionally nourished. You see that intensity is not always intimacy and longing is not always love. The pain of release becomes the doorway through which perception grows sharper, boundaries grow stronger, and emotional truth becomes harder to ignore. Relationships rarely involve only two people meeting. They also involve two identities being constructed. Without noticing it, you begin to occupy a psychological role inside the bond. You become the one who understands, the one who fixes, the one who waits, the one who leads, the one who sacrifices, or the one who holds everything together. These roles grow quietly but powerfully. They give you a sense of purpose and emotional orientation. Over time, you are not just in the relationship, you are performing a version of yourself within it. When the relationship ends, that version loses its stage, and the grief you feel is partly the grief of a character that no longer has a script. Identity roles form because the psyche seeks stability and meaning. When someone depends on you, desires you, or confides in you, your self-image reorganizes around that function. You feel important in a specific way, needed in a specific way, seen through a particular lens. The bond becomes a mirror that reflects a certain self back to you. If you were the protector, you felt strong. If you were the emotional anchor, you felt wise. If you were the pursued one, you felt valuable. These reflections are emotionally rewarding, and you begin to rely on them to define who you are. As the relationship deepens, the role can become more rigid. You may feel pressure to stay consistent with it even when it costs you authenticity. The helper feels guilty expressing need. The strong one hides vulnerability. The peacemaker swallows anger. The understanding one tolerates too much. The role becomes a mask worn so long it starts to feel like skin. Love then becomes intertwined with performance, and performance becomes intertwined with identity. When the relationship breaks, the mask suddenly has no audience. The helper has no one to rescue. The protector has no one to guard. The pursuer has no one to chase. This creates a strange emptiness that is often misinterpreted as missing the person alone. In truth, you are also missing the structured version of yourself that existed around them. The daily opportunities to enact that identity are gone, and without them you may feel undefined, reduced, or directionless. This is why people sometimes try to return not to the partner but to the role. They seek another person who will let them play the same part again. The pattern repeats because the psyche is trying to restore a familiar identity position. It feels safer to reuse a known role than to stand without one. But repetition without awareness leads to emotional stagnation. Grieving the role is more complex than grieving the person because it requires self-examination. You must ask which parts of your behavior were genuine and which were adaptive. Which traits were freely given and which were strategies to secure closeness. The end of the relationship exposes these layers. It shows how much of your identity was relationally constructed rather than internally grounded. In that exposure there is discomfort, but also possibility. When the role dissolves, space opens. You are no longer confined to a narrow emotional function. You can be strong and needy, supportive and uncertain, giving and boundaried. The self becomes more flexible, more whole, less dependent on a single relational mirror to feel real. Emotional pain is often treated as an enemy to be silenced, distracted, or escaped. Yet it functions more like a signal flare rising from the depths of the inner world. It marks the places where old injuries remain unhealed, and where unconscious patterns continue to repeat themselves. What hurts in the present moment is rarely born entirely in the present moment. The intensity of reaction usually points backward as much as it points to what is happening now. Pain becomes a doorway into the architecture of your emotional history. When a present event creates a disproportionate emotional response, it is usually touching an older wound. A delayed reply feels like abandonment. Mild criticism feels like rejection. Emotional distance feels like betrayal. The outer trigger is small, but the inner echo is large. This mismatch reveals that the psyche is not reacting only to what is happening. It is reacting to what has happened before and was never fully processed. The nervous system remembers what the conscious mind has tried to forget. Patterns hide inside repeated emotional outcomes. You may notice that different relationships produce the same kind of disappointment, even when the people seem different on the surface. You meet new faces but feel familiar hurt. This repetition is not bad luck alone. It is often the psyche recreating unresolved dynamics in an attempt to finally resolve them. You are drawn toward emotional situations that resemble the original wound, hoping this time the ending will change. Without awareness, the cycle continues because the selection process is unconscious. Emotional pain exposes attachment strategies formed early. Some people cling tighter when afraid, others detach quickly, others become overly accommodating, and others turn distant and self-protective. These responses once served as survival tools. They helped you maintain connection or safety in earlier environments. But what once protected you can later restrict you. Painful moments in adult relationships reveal which strategy you still use automatically, even when it no longer serves your growth. There are also hidden beliefs embedded inside emotional wounds, beliefs about worth, lovability, safety, and trust. Painful reactions often carry silent statements such as, "I am not enough, people always leave, my needs are too much," or "closeness is dangerous." These beliefs operate like invisible scripts directing behavior and perception. When pain is triggered, the script briefly becomes visible. If you listen closely to the thoughts that accompany the feeling, you can read the wound as language. Avoided pain strengthens patterns. Examined pain loosens them. When you immediately numb discomfort with distraction, denial, or blame, the underlying structure remains untouched. When you stay present with the feeling and become curious instead of defensive, information emerges. You begin to see links between past and present, between fear and reaction, between expectation and outcome. The emotion stops being just suffering and becomes data. There is a transformative shift when pain is treated as a messenger rather than a punishment. Instead of asking how to stop feeling it, you begin asking what it is showing. The question changes from "why does this always happen to me?" to "what does this always activate in me?" In that shift, responsibility returns, not as self-blame but as self-access. Hidden patterns move from shadow into awareness, and unresolved wounds move from silent control into conscious healing. True love is often confused with emotional intensity, sacrifice, and endurance, but intensity alone is not proof of depth. Many people stay in draining bonds because the feelings are strong, the attachment is powerful, and the emotional highs and lows feel dramatic and alive. Yet love that demands you betray your own needs, silence your truth, or constantly monitor your worth is not love in its mature form. It is attachment mixed with fear. Where fear dominates, authenticity slowly disappears. Self-abandonment begins in small compromises that seem harmless at first. You say yes when you mean no. You accept behavior that unsettles you. You minimize your needs to avoid conflict. You edit your personality to remain desirable. Each adjustment looks minor, but over time they accumulate into distance from your own center. You stop checking how you feel and start checking how you are perceived. The relationship becomes something you manage rather than something you live inside honestly. Fear-based connection creates hypervigilance. Instead of resting in the bond, you monitor it. You analyze tone, timing, word choice, and mood shifts. You feel relief when things are good, but the relief is fragile because it depends on continued approval and stability from the other person. Your nervous system never fully relaxes. You are emotionally on call, always adjusting, always anticipating. This state can feel like passion, but it is actually anxiety wearing romantic clothing. In a healthy bond, love expands your sense of self rather than shrinking it. You are more honest, not more guarded. You are more expressed, not more edited. You feel safer telling the truth than hiding it. Disagreement does not threaten the connection at its core. You are not punished with withdrawal, ridicule, or emotional distance for being real. Safety is not earned through perfection. It is built through mutual respect. Self-abandonment also appears as over-responsibility for the other person as emotions. You feel compelled to fix their moods, prevent their disappointment, or carry their unresolved pain. Empathy turns into emotional labor without boundary. You become a regulator for their inner world while neglecting your own. This imbalance quietly breeds exhaustion and resentment, even when love is present. Care without reciprocity becomes depletion. Fear of loss can keep people loyal to situations that are unkind to their spirit. The mind says something is better than nothing. The heart says at least there is connection. But when connection consistently costs dignity and inner stability, the price is too high. Love is not meant to be survived, it is meant to be experienced with openness and steadiness. When you must constantly brace yourself, you are not held, you are enduring. Real love allows differentiation. Two people remain distinct individuals with personal limits, preferences, and inner worlds. Saying no does not equal rejection. Asking for space does not equal abandonment. Expressing hurt does not equal attack. There is room for emotional oxygen. You are not required to disappear to belong. You are invited to appear more fully. The absence of constant fear is one of the clearest signals of emotional health in a relationship. You are not walking on psychological glass. You are walking on shared ground. Your voice remains intact. Your needs remain valid. Your inner compass remains consulted. Love becomes a place where you return to yourself more clearly, not a place where you slowly lose access to who you are. Leasing attachment is often mistaken for emotional coldness, but it is actually a movement toward inner balance. Attachment becomes unhealthy when your sense of stability depends entirely on another person's presence, approval, or response. In that state, your emotional center is outsourced. Your mood rises and falls based on signals you cannot control. Your thoughts orbit around someone else as choices. Your energy becomes reactive instead of directed. When attachment loosens, that scattered energy begins to return to its source, and with it comes a renewed sense of personal power. Power in this sense is not dominance or control over others. It is self-governance. It is the ability to choose your actions without being driven purely by fear of loss or hunger for validation. When attachment is tight, decisions become distorted. You tolerate what you would normally refuse. You chase what does not move toward you. You explain away what clearly hurts you. Your judgment bends under emotional dependency. Releasing attachment straightens perception. You start seeing behavior as it is instead of as you hope it will become. Clarity emerges because emotional noise decreases. Attachment generates constant inner negotiation. What they meant, why they changed tone, whether you should wait, reach out, apologize, or withdraw. The mind becomes crowded with interpretation and prediction. When you release attachment, much of this mental static fades. You are no longer trying to decode every signal for reassurance. Attention shifts from managing the bond to understanding yourself. Thoughts become more grounded, less frantic, more honest. There is also a restoration of choice. Attachment driven by fear creates compulsion. You feel you must respond, must pursue, must hold on. Your behavior feels urgent and non-optional. When attachment relaxes, space appears between feeling and action. You can want someone and still choose distance. You can care and still set limits. Desire stops being a command and becomes information. That space between impulse and response is one of the core experiences of psychological power. Emotional boundaries grow clear as attachment loosens. You recognize where you end and another person begins. Their moods are no longer automatically your responsibility. Their inconsistency is no longer your puzzle to solve. Compassion remains, but entanglement reduces. You can witness without absorbing, support without collapsing, love without merging identities. This separation is not disconnection, it is structure. Releasing attachment also reveals how much projection was involved. Strong attachment often carries imagined qualities placed onto the other person. Imagined safety, imagined completion, imagined rescue from loneliness or uncertainty. When you step back, projection withdraws and reality sharpens. You see both strengths and limits more accurately. Disappointment may appear, but so does truth, and truth is easier to work with than fantasy. Energy that was previously invested in monitoring and maintaining the attachment becomes available for self-development. Creativity returns. Neglected goals regain importance. Physical and emotional self-care feel relevant again. Your inner dialogue shifts from, how do I keep this, to, how do I grow from here? That redirection marks the return of agency. Detachment in its healthy form does not erase love or care, it removes desperation and distortion. You remain capable of connection, but you are no longer psychologically hostage to it. Your inner ground feels more solid, because it is no longer built on someone else as unpredictable availability. From that steadiness, perception clears, priorities reorganize, and your direction becomes guided more by values than by fear. Letting go is often interpreted as the death of love because the visible form of connection disappears. Conversations stop, routines break, shared space is empty, and the emotional current that once flowed between two people goes quiet. The surface signals suggest an ending. But love is not only an external exchange, it is also an inner experience that reveals your values, your needs, your fears, and your emotional capacities. When a bond ends, that inner material does not vanish. It turns inward and becomes available for examination. In that turning inward, self-discovery begins. During attachment, much of your attention is directed outward. You study the other person's moods, preferences, reactions, and availability. You adjust yourself in response. Your awareness becomes relationally focused. Letting go reverses the direction of attention. The questions change from, what are they feeling? And how do I keep this connection? To, what was I seeking? And why did this affect me so deeply? This shift is not small. It moves you from emotional dependency towards psychological insight. Love exposes your patterns of giving and receiving. Some discover they overextend to feel worthy. Others discover they withhold to feel safe. Some attach quickly to avoid loneliness. Others stay guarded to avoid vulnerability. While the relationship is active, these tendencies operate automatically. After letting go, they become visible because there is distance to observe them. Reflection replaces reaction. You begin mapping your emotional habits instead of simply living inside them. There is also discovering grief itself. The specific shape of your pain teaches you what mattered most to you. If you grieve lost closeness, you learn you value intimacy. If you grieve broken trust, you learn you value reliability. If you grieve feeling unseen, you learn you value recognition and understanding. Pain outlines your emotional priorities with surprising precision. Instead of viewing hurt as meaningless suffering, you can read it as a blueprint of your deeper needs. Letting go removes distraction. Relationships, even loving ones, consume psychic energy. They fill mental space with planning, interpreting, hoping, and remembering. When that structure falls away, empty space appears. At first it feels uncomfortable, even frightening. But empty space is psychologically fertile. It allows neglected interests, postponed goals, and silenced preferences to surface again. You notice what draws you when no one is watching. You rediscover how you think and choose without negotiation. Self-discovery also grows through reclaimed boundaries. After loss, many people recognize where they said yes against their instincts, where they ignored inner warnings, where they accepted less than they needed. This recognition strengthens the inner voice. Future decisions become more aligned because they are informed by lived emotional evidence rather than abstract ideals. There is a paradox in release. When you stop trying to preserve love at any cost, you understand it more accurately. You see the difference between connection and fusion, between care and self-erasure, between commitment and fear of being alone. Your definition of love matures. It becomes less about possession and more about truth, less about intensity and more about alignment. What appears to be an ending on the outside becomes an opening on the inside. The bond no longer shapes your days, but the awareness it awakened continues shaping your consciousness. You meet parts of yourself that were hidden beneath attachment, your resilience, your unmet needs, your authentic preferences, your emotional limits, and meeting them changes how you live and how you love next. So remember, letting go is not a failure, and it is not the end of love. It is an act of courage, a conscious return to yourself, and the first step toward clarity, freedom, and authenticity. In releasing what no longer serves you, you reclaim your energy, your voice, and your truth. You discover the parts of yourself that were hidden behind attachment, fear, and expectation. And in that discovery, you realize that the most profound love you can experience begins within you. Hold that love, honor that love, and let it guide every connection you allow into your life from this moment forward. Because when you let go, you do not lose, you become whole.